So as I was saying, it's great that so many people are here. I know when we planned this at this time, I thought, oh, I wonder if people will remember to come at 8:30, etc. And it's a beautiful sunny day here in friendly Manitoba, the center of Canada. Anyway, we're thrilled to be able to share our fair trade story that's taking place and still evolving in Manitoba. Winnipeg was just declared a fair trade town at the end of September. Thanks in large part to 3 out of the 4 panelists that are here, because one of them already was associated with a fair trade town before, which you'll probably hear about. And so Winnipeg was the 25th fair trade, having them share their stories, as well as then have some time for people to ask some questions. So I'm just going to start, and I'm actually, instead of introducing everyone throughout, I'll just introduce them prior to them talking, so there's a little variety there. So I'm going to first introduce Zack Gross. He is the Fair Trade Outreach Coordinator at the Manitoba Council for International Cooperation. And Zack has been involved in international development for almost 50 years. He started really young. And he has, part of that journey was being executive director at the Marquis Project, which is out in Brandon, for 25 years. And he's also teaches university courses on international development at Menno Simons College, as well as online at UBC. He's won many awards, one of which is Lifetime Achievement Award from Fair Trade Canada. So, and you can see a more fuller description in the participants package. So Zack, I'd like you to start by maybe providing a bit of context to some of the work that MCIC's Fair Trade Manitoba program has been doing over the past, last 8 or 10 years. And yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Janice. I don't think this one's working. I have all these agenda items I have to cover. How Change Happens by Duncan Green is a wonderful book that I think people here would be interested in reading, and he is going to be traveling across Canada in November. He is an Oxfam guy from Great Britain, and he's written a number of books around development. So he's going to be here in Winnipeg on November the 9th at the Human Rights Museum, but he's going to be in Vancouver, Ottawa, and a number of other places in between. So, Google Duncan Green trip across Canada or something. Very much worth reading the book or hearing the guy, or reading the book and then taking the book and getting the guy to sign it. And I found it particularly useful for us that are working on social change and global change. And he really takes us to task that some of the things we do are just counterproductive. So I was working at MCIC along with Janice about 10 years ago, and we were approached by some folks who wanted to get Winnipeg and Manitoba more involved in fair trade. We were way behind places like, the lower mainland of BC and Toronto and Quebec. We're always behind some of those places. And so we started an organization of sorts called Fair Trade Manitoba that was kind of a coalition of church folks and academic folks and unions and NGOs. And it sort of ran its course fairly quickly. We started off with lots of people coming to meetings and being very enthusiastic. And eventually there were just 4 of us who like red wine that ended up meeting in one guy's house. At that point, Janice and I thought we should try to find funding, and we ended up actually taking on the Fair Trade Manitoba name, and partly based on funding, partly based on other things that we needed to do, the whole initiative has grown. We're on the 4th year of a 5-year contract with Global Affairs Canada right now. What MCIC does is work with Manitobans for us all to become global citizens. And our feeling is that using fair trade as one of the vehicles to get there, both individual consumers and their consumer choices, but also social procurement. When it comes to things like the SDGs or sustainability, a lot of people focus on the environment. So we're trying to provide the social side of that. And we have found that there are lots of partners out there in business and in government, in various institutions, campuses, schools, etc., that this is where they want to go too. So we're not necessarily like flogging it, or, you know, it's not as if there's been great frustrations at getting it done. It's just that there's an awful lot of like-minded people working in different sectors that have come together. I told these guys that I wouldn't get really emotional and say how much we love one another. One of the bonding experiences we had as a group of us, mostly Manitobans, went down to Peru last year together to visit fair trade co-ops. It was a grueling experience, but it really, I think, brought us together as well. The Fair Trade Network, the Canadian Fair Trade Network and Fair Trade Canada have operated as national partners. And I've brought the magazine that the network puts out and some information about the programs that Fair Trade Canada does. We talked a bit about the Fair Trade Workplace program in our small group yesterday, so please feel free to take some of these things. I'll just say one more thing, that I had a kind of an aha moment maybe about a year and a half ago in a Fair Trade Network meeting, where I realized that we can go out and talk about these things as much as we want. We can report huge numbers of people that come out to our events, etc., and we can disaggregate them as male and female and does not want to say. But are we actually accomplishing something concrete? So I began to focus my work more on signing people up to programs like Fair Trade Towns, Fair Trade Workplaces, having fair trade events. We had 3 fair trade weddings in Manitoba this past summer. So to move beyond the discussion, to move beyond the intention to concrete action. And I think for me, it makes my work, our work, more satisfying. Nothing more satisfying than Winnipeg becoming a fair trade town after years of effort. Whereas working with Duane and Selkirk, it was a slam dunk. Anyway, lots more to be said. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Zack. Next, I'd like to introduce Dwayne Nichol. And Duane is the Chief Administrative Officer at the City of Selkirk. And he has a master's in, let's see, what is it? Master's in Public Administration from the University of Victoria. And prior to being the CAO, he was a city councillor in Selkirk, as well as deputy mayor for a while. He was not working for the city at that time. He was with Assiniboine Credit Union, I believe. And he has, one of his key claims to fame is he's modernizing and improving communications between citizens and their city government. And this is based on the International Association of Public Participation Framework for Engagement, and under Dwayne's leadership, the city is integrating citizen engagement into the city's standard operating practices and policies. He's also a volunteer in a number of different organizations, one of them being the Marine Museum of Manitoba. So Duane is going to provide a little bit of context as to why he does what he does and how is fair trade involved in that. Duane.
Yeah, so thank you. Just for official purposes, I have to say I don't actually have my master's yet. I'm working on it. I'm almost finished. I just want to make it clear. So I should be working on it right now, but that's another story. You can tell that I had to write my own bio there. So anyways, that's a terrible photo. So I've written some things down. I'm going to speak from my notes when we talk with questions. I won't read just because I tend to ramble, so we're all passionate. I wanted to provide a little context for our involvement, and so my perspective as a government leader. Yeah, So the city is an interesting place. The city of Selkirk is an interesting place. We're a small city of about 10,000 people, but we have a service and trade area of about 45,000 people. So that puts a lot of demand on our community with very little, with a very limited resource base. We're an older city by Manitoba standards, and therefore we have aged infrastructure. For about 30 years, we had population decline, and only recently has that trend turned around. We have a below average median income. We have a higher level of crime as measured by the Crime Severity Index. So we have many, many local issues that our citizens would expect us to focus on, and many excuses, it provides us many excuses to ignore our responsibilities as global citizens. So in this context, it's not unreasonable for citizens to say, why are you using my tax dollars, why are you using city resources to become a fair trade workplace or fair trade town? They see that as potentially frivolous. Sort of that, why are you using my tax dollar to send to Africa when I should be fixing my pot? I notice how I go southern accent when I'm not, that's a standard thing, and I think it's unfortunate. But I think that sort of thinking is born out of fear. Fear of losing ground on the zero-sum game that we've been told our economy and our social order is built upon. It's born from a myopic and reductionist theory about humanity and society. And this is the thinking that created the challenges we face today, and to paraphrase Einstein, it won't be the thinking that we use to solve our problems. So first, there's a moral imperative to procurement via fair trade. Through it, we reduce our reputational risk as an organization. I mean, I've not done a poll or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure that people would expect that we would, most of our citizens would expect that we reduce our support for inappropriate child labor, inequality, and environmental degradation. I think that's sort of something they assume that we're doing. I mean, I know people would find it unacceptable if we were to buy gravel from a gravel pit in Saskatchewan that was using child labor as opposed to letting them go to school, and not providing safety equipment and having people get hurt and lose their lives. And so it's important from that perspective. But beyond the obvious benefits of fair trade, the act of choosing fair trade products, even choosing to consider fair trade products, makes us think beyond our little bubble. So for the city of Selkirk, promoting fair trade provided the added value of engaging our citizens to think about themselves as global citizens. It demands that they think about the choices, the impacts that their choices have, and it creates a space for us to talk about social justice internationally and locally. It provides us with an excuse to talk about environmental protection. So from our perspective, people who think about themselves as global citizens are much more likely to think about social justice on local issues, so consider those things. So it's beyond the obvious benefit, it's getting them to consider themselves as global citizens, and when they see themselves that way, if they make the choice to buy fair trade products, they're much more likely to think about, the well-being of other citizens, not just internationally, but also locally. So beyond our citizens, it also gives us an opportunity to talk to our employees about the values we have as an organization. We're a municipality. Our focus, our reason for being is to help citizens to create great quality of life. But in today's global age, we're not. Municipal borders are sort of imaginary. That's something that we've drawn out because we like to have labels on things, and that's the way our mind works as humans. But the environment doesn't respect that, and so we're all. I think I saw a tweet the other quoting someone from this conference yesterday about we're all citizens of humanity, and that's essentially. I mean, that's obviously true, but it's not the way we think. And I think by the city supporting and endorsing and talking about it, it gives us an opportunity to get people to think about our neighbors both next door and across the pond. So in closing, there's some axioms that I thought about as I was preparing the notes, and I think they're useful for framing the conversation we're going to have this morning. Social and human capital are the basis for all success. I believe that to be true more than economic capital, more than financial capital. Diversity is nature's solution to all problems. And when we talk about the context of engagement, it's the diversity of ideas and thoughts and opinions and perspectives. Citizen engagement is not just a means to an end, but is an end in and of itself. So the act of engaging people and talking about it creates new solutions, identifies new problems, and I think that's really important. And finally, compassion is a renewable resource. And so we can do more than just care about people locally. We can, you know, there's no end to the compassion that we have as humans, and in fact, I think that's why social capital is so different and so much more valuable, that the more you feel compassion, the more compassion you have for people, and it's not, you don't ever run out. So with that, I'll shut up, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. I know you're going to get big claps for this. Next, I'd like to introduce Donna Dag. And Donna is the Manager of Sustainable Development for Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation. She has a master's degree. You finished it, correct? Yes. And she has 20 years of professional experience in the environmental field. At Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries, which is a Crown corporation in Manitoba, her role is to assist with advancing the corporation's sustainable goals, which include waste minimization, water stewardship, energy efficiency, carbon emission reduction, as well as responsible procurement. Donna has been a key driver and player on our Fair Trade Winnipeg Steering Committee, and in Winnipeg becoming a fair trade town. She was also very key in assisting and planning the national conference that was held here 2 years ago for the Canadian Fair Trade Network. So, Donna.
So I'll just give you a little bit of information about Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries and our interaction with Fair Trade, and MCIC, who's been instrumental in helping us to integrate Fair Trade into our organization. So like was said, I'm a Manager of Sustainable Development, which means I actually don't own anything within the organization. My role is to work with all the various departments and try and push sustainable concepts and sustainable thinking into those various departments. So if you look at Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries, just to give you a sense of the organization, we're 3,000 employees. We have 68 liquor marts. We bring in liquor into a distribution center and redistribute it throughout the province of Manitoba. So it's a retail sales of liquor. We also own and operate 2 casinos within Manitoba. So I tell you this so that you can get a sense of just how large we are and just how much buying we do. So we procure millions and millions of dollars worth of goods and services a year. So knowing this and knowing MCIC, and I operate under the province of Manitoba has a Sustainable Development Act. And within that act, there's a wide variety of principles and guidelines. And one of the guidelines is to think global while acting local. And so concepts like fair trade and other third-party certifications that are out there, like FSC certified wood and paper products or EPEAT certified electronic equipment, are really helpful when it comes time to procurement for for businesses in terms of that global reach. And fair trade is probably one of the best examples of how we can reach not just from an environmental perspective, but from a social perspective as well. So a number of years ago, MCIC, or Zack in particular, was really helpful in talking to our executive from a retail level and encouraging us to put fair trade wines offerings in our liquor marts. Now, it's still up to the consumers to buy them. But we can do promotion, we can do activities to incentivize people to go into our liquor marts and purchase fair trade product. He was also instrumental in talking to our chefs at our casinos, and each one of our casinos has about 1.5 million customers per year. So to go from coffee to fair trade coffee, and we offer free coffee at our casinos. So we could do a lot in terms of fair trade, and he was instrumental in talking about fair trade, the impacts fair trade has in terms of biodiversity, fair labor, all of the wonderful things that the contracts are written in the language. There's so many wonderful things attached to fair trade that sometimes we need help as sustainable development practitioners to get that message to our executive and to our various departments. So essentially, I have the best job in the world because I'm allowed to work in corporate responsibility, helping all the various departments to become more sustainable, integrate sustainable thinking into their business decisions, and largely look for outreach within our community, within the NGOs, whether or not it's MCIC or Lake Friendly or Be Better Manitoba or Sustainable Procurement Manitoba, to really pull the resources that we have locally to make our business more sustainable. So maybe I'll stay at that.
Thanks, Donna. So the next speaker is Steve Strecker. He is the executive chef at Sparrow Bistro at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. And many of us did the tour last night, and yesterday we had Angela Cassie speak to us about the development of the museum. So, and it would have been great if you guys would have been open last night, because I'm sure lots of people, we were all looking for places to eat after our tour, but anyway, and the food at Era is great. So Steve is a graduate from the Red River College, and he's a chef, and he has been working with Sparrow hotels at both formerly, I guess, the current restaurant, and is now the executive chef at the Sparrow Bistro restaurant at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. And the Norwood Hotel, where many of you are staying, is part of the Sparrow Hotels chain group here, locally owned. Anyway, Steve would call his style of cooking as ever-changing. So Steve, maybe you can give us some background and context of why you have incorporated fair trade into a lot of your cooking.
Okay, hello. Thanks for coming out this morning, and you know what a way to go and follow up having go on last after these well-spoken individuals. You guys do know I'm a chef, right? I'm meant to be in the back, not talking from people. Okay. Okay. So yes, hello. I'm Steve. I'm the executive chef at Sparrow Bistro. As was touched on, it's part of the Sparrow Hotels. We are a fair trade workplace. It was something that we kind of took on the last couple of years with the help of Zack and Donna and many of the other people involved in Fair Trade Winnipeg. Our CEO, Ben Sparrow, was originally on, I believe, the Fair Trade Winnipeg board. And then after a little while, he had asked me to take over because Era really focused in on fair trade products. Now, these guys touched on a lot of the really good points that I don't think I have to go into, but I can talk a little bit more about why, as a restaurant, we wanted to get involved with fair trade. And then we can talk a little bit about my ever-changing cuisine. So fair trade, at the end of the day, for any restaurant, you have to go and satisfy your customer. If that's with the quality of food that you're serving, with the initiatives that you take on, it's all about their dollar, essentially. So one thing that we found at Era, being that we were located in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, we had to take on these initiatives. It was just something that we knew we had to be a part of, otherwise that would just be a media hailstorm. But we found that fair trade products in general is much like organics back in the 80s. It had a very slow start, but as public engagement increased, we found that better and better quality products were coming out and more raw products were coming out. A lot of the times you find fair trade chocolate bars that you would taste it and it'd be like eating chalk. Nobody really wanted it, nobody wanted to buy it. However, once you were able to get fair trade sugar, fair trade cocoa powder, fair trade chocolate, then as a chef, we could start fabricating those items, working with them, really shining what they have to offer and getting the community behind it. So as a company, we also realize that we have quite the substantial buying power and that our dollars should matter. Pretty much any time that we go out to buy any product to go into the restaurant, we have three main rules we have to follow. It has to be local first. If it's not local, it has to be fair trade. And if it's not fair trade, it has to be sustainable. So you won't see shrimp on their menu. I mean, we're in the middle of the prairies. It'd be insane. But you will see trout, or you will see fair trade coffee, fair trade wines, which, by the way, Zach, thank you so much. They're awesome. You will see fair trade sugars. And one of the things that we also learned working with Fair Trade Winnipeg is to become a fair trade certified workplace, the requirements are quite easy to accomplish. It's something that we all have in the restaurants anyways. You have to have a fair trade coffee, you have to have fair trade sugar, and you have to have a fair trade item in one other category. For most of us, it's wine. But there's so many other things you can get. You can get quinoa, apples, citrus, cocoa powder, spices. I mean, you go down to any of, I think it's 10,000 villages, and they have 20 spices on the shelf that you can work with. And as a chef, the more variety that you have, the easier it is for your job to do. So when it comes to our ever-changing cuisine, when I first started off, I'm classically trained as a French chef. That's what Red River teaches. That's what they believe the basic start and finish. However, when you start working with fair trade, you're not getting your fair trade items from France. You're getting them from Sri Lanka and Peru and all over the place in different styles of cuisine. So you have to try and work that into what you're doing. So we learned early on that if we're able to source a lot of these products, such as coffee or chili powder, or whatever, we were going to have to go and change our style of cuisine while still appealing to the local consumer. So we found a lot of success in going with more vegetarian and vegan options while incorporating various strong flavors like the chili spices that you find in fair trade, and yeah, the coffee. I'm kind of rambling. Should have put me last.
That's okay.
But yeah, I hope that answers the question. I'm sure there'll be more questions. But yeah, that's kind of what we do as a company, and that's kind of how we believe in fair trade.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, and so there's other groups that we also work with that are not represented here that might be kind of not your traditional partners. So as Zack suggested, Fair Trade Florists, which is a distributor of flowers across Western Canada. And we have, the gift store at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights also has a number of fair trade products and that sort of thing. Here we've been talking a lot about human rights. We have a new feminist international assistance policy, and which has a strong case for feminism and gender. And I'm wondering if anyone would like to talk about how fair trade actually has a role to play in that regard. And I guess to make it even a little bit more general, I'll also throw out the other part that's really something we've been talking about and a number of people in the room are working on are the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Like, SDGs, are they something that you guys consider in your work? Is it under the radar? So yeah, so I'm not sure. Donna, do you want to take a stab at that? Thanks.
In terms of the SDG goals, I mean, certainly from Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries perspective, it's a little bit foreign to our employees. We do incorporate it into education and awareness for our procurement department. We do centralized procurement, so we have a procurement department. Because specifically, I think it's goal number 12, which is responsible procurement, is specifically for government. And so there's where we basically talk about the SDGs from a procurement perspective on goal number 12. It's something that I've struggled with when the millennial goals, the UN millennial goals were there, and then they've now been replaced several years ago with the new set of goals. These new set of goals are easier to integrate into a business type setting. So I think maybe I've kind of need to catch up and do a little bit more of really connecting us with all of the other SDG goals. Well, I guess they are SDGs. So yeah, I don't know that I've done a good enough job of integrating it within our organization and sort of using that as a change the way we think and further connecting us with the global world. So I think it's me that I need to do a little bit more in terms of integrating it into our organization.
Thanks, Donna. Dwayne?
Yeah, so I think we're even further behind in our integration, but so one of the projects that we're working on at the city is developing, it started off with a KPI project, and we're moving away from key performance indicators to sustainability indicators, which is a far more murky topic to discuss, and obviously the development goals provide a framework for that in some regard, but we're trying to make it more local in our perspective. So it's one of the frameworks that we're going to be looking at as we develop our own sustainability indicators. So it's easy enough for the city to measure output, so the things that we do, but that's not tying that to how it provides quality of life to our citizens isn't always clear. And so rather than do that, because a lot of those traditional key performance indicators that you might see in business are really short-term focus. So the quarterly reporting and annual reporting, so forth. As a city, we're permanent, and the idea we have to shift our 4-year election cycle thinking to a 100-year cycle thinking. So what is the community going to be like 100 years down the line? And it's our system doesn't support that level of thinking. It doesn't traditionally. It's really focused on getting people elected 4 years later. And I think part of our engagement with our citizens is by developing these indicators and reporting on them publicly. They can hold our elected officials accountable, and in turn, our elected officials can hold their bureaucracy accountable. So me and my team. So by developing that, I think we create the opportunity for, again, more informed discussions, more informed evaluation, and target setting, which is something that really drives performance in a sort of a traditional organizational standpoint. So, yeah.
So maybe just a follow-up on that is, I work in sustainable development, but there is a corporate responsibility director, and we work on, of course, given our area of organization, we look at responsible gaming and responsible liquor consumption. We also have community support, which we do more of the philanthropic, as well as sustainable development, which we've often thought of as sort of as environmental, but social when it comes to procurement. But in sort of keeping with what Dwayne is talking about, we are in the process of doing what's called GRI reporting, which is Global Reporting Index reporting, which utilizes the SDGs to a certain extent. So we are seeing it just naturally being integrated into the way that we will be reporting to our stakeholders, which is our community, because we're a provincial crown corporation, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and waste minimization and procurement as well, in terms of using third-party certifications to get that global reach. So we are starting to see more of the ways that we measure corporate responsibility utilizing the SDGs.
Thanks, Donna. Well, you still have the mic. Maybe you can just share some of the, that when you guys made the first procurement using with fair trade coffee and tea, just the scale of what that looks like compared to just us, our own household consumption of fair trade.
So for us, we have 3,000 employees, and at our head office locations, as well as our distribution centers, which are huge warehouses, we have fair trade and organic coffee. And in addition, at our 2 casinos, which, as I mentioned, there's 1.5 million visitors per year at each one of those casinos. Our restaurants, and as well as the free coffee offered through the machines, is all fair trade certified. So that is a commitment that was made several years ago, I believe. So what's interesting about that is, because we're so large, we can actually, when we put requirements for fair trade into bid documents, we can move the distributors, because everyone wants to do business with us, because we procure so much. So when you're looking at, a 3-year coffee contract for, a couple $1 million, people want in on the game, and the only way they can get in on the game is if they offer fair trade products to us. So we are able, because of our size, to have considerable impact in the local economy to move some of these ideas forward. It's the same thing with, I think, on the in our liquor marts, we offer 28 different types of wine currently from Chile, Argentina, and South Africa, which are fair trade. Now, we still have to get the consumers to buy the fair trade product, but we can. We have what we call category specialists that really help to bring in the fair trade wines, and it's not an easy task sometimes. There may be a fair trade winery, or but the labeling might not be correct, and we can't get it through into Canada because of our food our food requirements for product labeling. And so we have really dedicated staff at Liquor and Lotteries that can support helping to get these products into Canada. Once they're into Canada, then they can be easily offered in any other jurisdiction across Canada. So those are some of the really cool things that we can do as an organization to support fair trade.
And just to follow up on that, I think the other thing is, the thing that's really big for a group like MCIC is they actually have money to advertise. And so they take out full-page ads in the Winnipeg Free Press. They have shelf talkers in the Liquor and Lotteries, or in the wine store, liquor marts, and that. And so that's just something that many of us in the room wouldn't be able to take on our own. So, Dwayne, I know you wanted to follow up quickly, and I will turn over to this slide in a minute.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, that's one of the powers of larger organizations and government organizations, is that we get to move the marketplace. Selkirk not so big, obviously, in terms of our purchasing power. However, when we first got into fair trade, myself personally, I was with the Assiniboine Credit Union, and one of the things that we decided to do was convert all the coffee that we offered in our branches to fair trade long before the Fair Trade Workplace program had started. It's just something that we felt that we needed to do, and so that was a challenge, because all of our branches, you know, credit union movement, they all sort of they're focused on building their local communities and neighborhoods. We had just merged 3 credit unions into one, and everyone had different coffee suppliers. And so I was the manager of corporate social responsibility at the time, and my job was to get everyone to convert to this. So one easy way of doing that was, well, just to say we were going to buy fair trade, have one contract go out, and then convert just to one supplier for all the branches. Well, that created a problem, because most of these smaller businesses, the distributors, were members to our credit union, so we were making a choice. So rather than do that, we said, this is what we want to provide. We give people enough time, and each of those providers had to go look and source a fair trade product. So we forced it, because of the contract that we had, because of the amount of coffee that we're using for those small suppliers. It was an important contract for them. So they found a source, they provided that. So the next business that wanted to provide it was that much easier, because them as distributors knew where they could get it and they could bring it in. And so that was one way our contribution to the fair trade was not just that we were using it, but that we had created opportunity for other people to use it. In Selkirk, we did the same thing. So rather than replace or source it ourselves, we talked to our current coffee provider, because they're a local resident, they have the contract, made them go out and look for the product and source it. Now, as a result of that, they have a fair trade option in their quiver, I guess to say, that they get to shop around and use for other businesses within our community. So I think that's one of the benefits. You know, we get to, as a government, we ought to be to shift the marketplace. We get to do that. So.
Great, thanks. Now, I'm conscious of time, so I'm just wondering, do people in the audience have any questions that they'd like to ask our panel here? And if people do, Megan, would I be able to ask you to take this mic? And I think our first question is going to be in French, so you may want to just put on our responders.
Alors, je vais vous laisser le temps. Je vais poser une question en français. Vous me connaissez? C'est bon? Merci beaucoup. C'est un bel exemple de mobilisation et d'engagement qui change le monde. Et vous êtes inspirant. Et c'est très intéressant d'entendre des personnes qui sont des décideurs, des décideuses dans une entreprise comme la vôtre, madame, dont j'ai oublié le nom, et vous aussi, vous aussi. Janice nous a posé une question sur les objectifs de développement durable et la nouvelle politique féministe. Est-ce qu'on peut développer encore plus loin, avoir des politiques d'achat responsables et si on a des vêtements, vos employés ont sûrement des uniformes, vous aussi. Alors, tant mieux si on peut les faire coudre localement. Mais qui a produit le coton? je porte un vêtement qui a peut-être été fabriqué au Bangladesh. Est-ce que nous boycottons tout ce qui vient du Bangladesh? Parce que les femmes, vous le savez, depuis l'écrasement du Rana Plaza au Bangladesh, on sait dans quelles conditions épouvantables elles travaillent. Mais les militantes là-bas nous disent « Non, ne boycottez pas, on a besoin de travailler. Mais parlez aux compagnies, exigez qu'on ait des bonnes conditions de travail. » Donc, cette idée d'une chaîne d'approvisionnement et qui inclut les droits des femmes qui fabriquent nos vêtements, qui sont très beaux, même s'ils viennent du Bangladesh, mais est-ce qu'elles ont le droit d'être syndiquées? Est-ce qu'elles ont le droit d'avoir leur mot sur leurs conditions de travail? Est-ce qu'elles ont un salaire décent? Et c'est complémentaire au développement local parce que tout ne peut pas être local. Et est-ce que nous, du Canada, parce que c'est important, tout le travail que vous faites, on en fait au Québec, je sais que dans toutes les provinces, cette grande démarche de commerce équitable, nous sommes en train de l'enraciner et je ne crois pas qu'il y ait beaucoup de Canadiennes ou de Canadiens qui ne comprennent pas ce que ça veut dire. Mais est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas demander au gouvernement du Canada d'avoir une politique d'achat responsable? Et peut-être que ce que Freddy nous parlait hier, qui a construit nos ordinateurs? Vous en avez parlé. Qui? Ceux qu'on achète au gouvernement du Canada. Bien, peut-être qu'on se posera des questions sur notre politique avec la République démocratique du Congo et les minières canadiennes. Donc, ce serait la sensibilisation des décideurs au niveau d'une politique d'achat responsable. Et pourquoi, ensemble, on ne viserait pas le gouvernement du Canada? Bien sûr, il faut continuer nos villes, nos gouvernements provinciaux, mais j'aurais envie qu'on ait un mouvement pan-canadien.
Thank you, Michelle. Donna, do you want to just respond to that? And then I'll maybe Zack.
So I can speak a little bit in terms of these are the passionate issues that we have in procurement as well. And so there are different things that happen on the local level, but I hear you on the federal level. It sure would be nice to have a conflict mineral policy for the federal government. They've tried it in the States, and then we got Trump, so it's out. But just to give you a little bit of a sense of how we can push the envelope forward, there's the province of Manitoba has a responsible manufacturing for clothing policy that requires us as government entities and crown corporations to have anybody who's selling us clothing sign off, and they have to give us a list of all of the manufacturers across the supply chain for those articles of clothing. And it's not foolproof, but what we do say in our procurement documents is if we ever find out that you're providing us with clothing that comes from a sweatshop or that does not follow the labor laws of the country of origin, we will never do business with you again. And so we have a little bit of clout, but it certainly isn't there yet in terms of full integration. In terms of the concept of, in terms of the issues with conflict minerals, which is an incredibly important issue, there are certain third-party certifications, such as EPEAT certified, that is really taking it serious and incorporating requirements for supply chain management and following the supply chain for different organizations. Oh, sorry, for different, to make sure that the Dells and the different computer manufacturers and the imaging equipment manufacturing and the phone manufacturing are now following their trail of where they're getting the minerals for their electronics. So it is happening slowly, and that's why I we use at Liquor and Lotteries a lot of third-party certifications because we can't follow that supply chain. We need another third-party entity to follow the supply chain for us, such as Fair Trade third-party certification, EP certification, Marine Stewardship Council certification for fish. That gives us that sort of inroad to that ecosystem and to those social infrastructure where these commodities are coming from. So I don't know if I'm helping a lot, but there are things happening that support the SDGs.
Zack, did you want to talk anything about federal?
Yeah, I won't take up too much time, but it's a huge issue, and I think the fair trade movement is probably sort of undercapitalized at this point to take it on in a huge way. There is a federal effort undergoing now with the Liberal government to have a more social procurement. We have been in touch with the office of Jim Carr, who's the industry minister and is a Winnipeg MP, and hopefully we'll meet with him this month. But I mean, you meet with politicians and hopefully something will come of it. As an old guy, I can remember efforts that have been made years ago to do things like labeling clothing so that you not only know that the clothing was made, say, in India, but you actually know where, what factory, and then you can do the tracing. And that was defeated or died in the House of Commons years ago after the Liberals made a huge show of working on it, but it never actually came to a vote, which happens with lots of good things. There's things that individuals can do. I'm wearing fair trade socks, so thank you. So that's something that, you know, an individual can do, but it doesn't necessarily make that global impact. There is a little baby importing process beginning in Canada to bring fair trade certified t-shirts in from India with all the right markings for third-party certified, but they're really small at this point, unfortunately. I just want to tell a story because I know some people are thinking, how do we operationalize some of these things in our programs? And when we were in Selkirk, and Selkirk was working on becoming a fair trade town, Dwayne's office gave us a couple of their transit buses. On 2 occasions, we filled them with students with cameras, and we went to all of the grocery stores. We went to Walmart, etc. We let them know in advance that we were going to show up, and their managers took us around to show us what their fair trade products were. In some places, like the co-op store, the guy was very excited, almost like a proud papa, about his fair trade products. He had them all lined up to show us. He told the students about how important it was to care about people, to care about the world. Other places we went, they had no idea. We ended up showing them where the fair trade products were, and you know, somebody was just told, okay, you have to deal with these students. But I think that was a huge learning outing for the students, who behaved extremely well. And out of this has come a video, which is hopefully soon going to be released, but we watched it at an assembly in a school in Selkirk last week. And the video is just really exciting, and it's all about the students asking the questions and the store managers trying to satisfy them with their answers.
Thank you. So we have 2 minutes. You have a question? Oh, and there's one in the back, so we'll get to that one too.
My question is for Zack, and it popped up right at the beginning of the conference. I hope I won't come off as like aggressive, but it's not meant to be. I was just recently in Guatemala studying fair trade and co-ops and the importance of all that movement. And I spent 2 weeks with the local farmers there in co-ops. And this is what he told me. So those are his words. So I'm looking for your opinion. How can co-ops be fair trades when the fair trade movement is just becoming a trademark or a label, and it's almost impossible for us to even afford being fair trade? What is your opinion about fair trade as a trademark? He was saying that people cannot even buy and becoming fair trade, so his products are not even being bought, even though that's the objective of being fair trade. It's a marketing tool, that's what he was saying. They are losing out. So I'm just wondering if those issues are being discussed in the fair trade movement. How is your organization discussing these issues or those concerns?
Yeah, I don't think you're being aggressive at all. What you just asked is one of the things we talk about. Last Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago, we actually had the new Executive Director of Fair Trade Canada and the Executive Director of the Fair Trade Network here in Winnipeg for a day-long meeting, and we spent half the day on that question. One answer is that while we're passionate about fair trade, we didn't say it was perfect. It's a roadmap. The fair trade movement, probably like a lot of aid programs, like a lot of well-meaning activities, had a certain colonial tinge to it at one point, that the decisions were being made in Europe by people in Fair Trade International, and that there wasn't enough representation of people from the third world. Now that's changed. Even in our own Fair Trade Canada, of which I'm a board member, we found that there was this huge effort to get companies to sign up without really talking to them about what fair trade is about beyond selling product, to get beyond, the profit side of it or whatever, to start to talk more about the social development. I feel confident now that we in Canada have turned the corner, and that in terms of the Fair Trade Canada, and that we are bringing pressure to bear on the European side. I'm going to blame it all on them. That we need to listen to those kinds of concerns. One of the things that's specifically is that there's an effort being made to lower the costs so that people can enter the fair trade system. For the work that we do, there's also a greater effort needed to promote the product, because there are still more fair trade products being produced, way more than are being actually sold as fair trade. So, like, I like Starbucks coffee. Starbucks calls itself a fair trade company, but they buy a small portion of fair trade coffee at the fair trade price, but they buy way more fair trade coffee at the world market price. So it's almost like a blackmail kind of thing. So there are issues to be dealt with. But if you don't, well, in my opinion, if you walk away from this and say it ain't gonna work, well, then you're never gonna get it done. But if you stay involved and you keep pushing, I've seen changes happening, say, over the last 5-10 years that make me optimistic that it's going to get better.
Are there grants for those people that would like to be?
Yes. So I can give you more information.
Just to quickly follow up on that, one of my responsibilities for Fair Trade Winnipeg is to try and get restaurants involved on it. And many restaurants have the same view. It's just a trademark, it's just a greenwash. It is much like organics in the 80s. When it first started off, people just seen it as like added value without actually adding the value. But by getting more people involved in it, you actually reduce those costs to the point where it does become viable for the farmer to sell their product as a fair trade product, and you allow it to be more accessible to the general public, which as a restaurant is my main goal. Just to add to Zach's points.
Great, thanks. Donna, were you?
Yeah, I think it's a consumer-driven. Fair trade is consumer-driven, so our role in being a fair trade town or a fair trade business is to drive up the demand so that when farmers in the Global South are growing to a fair trade certification standard, that they can actually sell all their product in a fair trade certification standard to that fair trade, instead of 20% or 40% of their product being sold as fair trade and the rest they're selling on the general market. So I think fair trade works as consumers demand the product, but part of it is we need to increase the demand at the consumer level.
Great, thank you. Well, our time is up. I want to... Oh, but I have these people telling me that the time is up. Okay, is it really, really quick? They'll be okay? Okay, Dwayne, you're walking out of here, aren't you? Okay, okay,
Sorry.
very quickly.
I think we were thinking of 2 questions, but anyways, this kind of connects well with what has been just said. So I think one of the things that came up throughout the conference or the forum was reaching public or reaching the wider public as opposed to just us talking amongst ourselves about what we feel is important. And I'm wondering, in a restaurant setting, how you interact with customers and how you can kind of be more frontline in that way, and how have you seen change occur as a result of having that interface?
Okay, so engaging the public via restaurant, there's lots of ways you can do it. The big one that we see nowadays is social media. I was trying, our hashtags, ICN, so hashtag ICN, everybody engage, sorry, hashtag ICN engage. Social media is probably the biggest one. I mean, we have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, pick your poison. As a chef, I'm kind of it's a bittersweet thing for me. I absolutely hate it, but it's a necessary evil. Also, just by featuring the items that are fair trade on your menu, and much like you would label something that's gluten-free or vegetarian, you can also label what contains fair trade products. If you're a manufacturer and you're producing, say, a jar of jam, in order to label it fair trade, I believe you have to have at least 25% of the base product be fair trade, or have fair trade additives, and if it's something like a cocoa mix, you have to have 8% of the base product being fair trade. So clear and concise labeling, social media presence, Fair Trade Canada, and I'm sure actually Fair Trade International, there's many events that kind of take on campuses and restaurants. We just had Campus Week, which we did the Fair Trade Big Sale. So to raise awareness to the general public, campuses were selling baked goods with fair trade products in. We did a little thing at the restaurant as well. There's also Fair Trade Month, where we do coffee sales, and every cup of coffee that's sold is donated to either Fair Trade Canada, Fair Trade Winnipeg, or one of the many suppliers to help promote them. And just general engagement like forums like this to try and get people talking about it and why we do it and why we use it.
Thanks, Steve. Dwayne says he has a really little short interjection.
Yeah, I'm a little more Machiavellian about it. I think what we have to do is meet people where they're at, and sometimes that means you have to interrupt their regular course of action. So, you know, at Assiniboine Credit Union, and what I'm trying to do at the city, at Assiniboine we spent $100,000 a year on promotional items, right? Trying to generate business for the credit union, and we bought a whole lot of plastic crap and give it away. And so you can't be a social justice leader and do that sort of thing. You can't be an environmental leader and do that sort of thing. So we looked to buy fair trade products or locally sourced products, and to tell a broader story. So when someone went to us in Manitoba, we have socials, and then there's prizes, draws you can win, and you harass local businesses to give you product, these promotional items. So when we give those out, we have an opportunity to tell a story. And so we took that opportunity to tell that story. We're doing that at the city. Part of our promotional buy now is to buy locally sourced, or buy from local firms that are sourcing fair trade product. And we have an opportunity to interrupt people's regular course, the regular day, by going, this is fair trade, this is what it means. By using this is the impact that you're having. And so they didn't come looking for that message, but they found it. And I think that that's the opportunity that we have. As a city, we communicate regularly with our public, probably not often enough, but when we do that, it's always finding that opportunity to say, hey, by the way, we're also doing this, and this is why it's important to us. So it's really critical that on social media, whenever we have an opportunity about it, we interrupt their regular thinking, and we bring that in. The more times we hit them with that message, the more time. And this is the benefit of that non-traditional partnerships. So it's one thing for NGOs to speak about it, but it's a whole other thing when a private business says it's important. It's a whole other thing when people's government says that it's important. You're now hearing that message from a number of different angles, and eventually people get it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and one of the things that we did was we tried to get out of and talk to different groups and have them help us share the message to engage their constituents. I think also we started quite a few years ago with fair trade events because we knew that even some local organizations were having things, but just as a little mark so that they could, and we created one, so that they could put on their posters and stuff, so that even if people, you know, they might just, oh, what is that? So if they saw it enough, they would think about it. So we were doing that here, and luckily the national organization took it on, and now you can have a fair trade event, and whenever you're holding an event, its requirements are not that hard, but you can register, and so that also gets it out with more people. But I really must wind up because we've got a rest of a full program. But I really want to thank Donna, Dwayne, Steve, and Zack for sharing their insight. I'm sure we could have talked for much longer.